Yet again, I found myself going up to Auckland, the largest city in New Zealand, for the monthly Live Day event at the Museum of Transport and Technology, better known by its acronym of MOTAT. This time, the theme was the railways, and a pair of very recently restored locomotives had their unveiling ceremony as part of the day's events. Unfortunately, the rain was absolutely chucking it down for most of the morning and early afternoon. Normally, two staples of the Live Days are Baldwin Steam Tram No. 100 and ex-Wellington double-decker electric tram No. 47, but neither of these machines were running on November 19. I'm not sure why 100 wasn't running, but as for 47, I realised that it doesn't make sense to run this thing in the rain because her top deck is open to the elements. I arrived at the museum around 10 minutes before they opened, getting there just in time to see the other trams starting the day's work. The trams that were actually running were Auckland B Class No. 11, ex-Melbourne W2 Class No. 321, and ex-Wellington Double Saloon Mark 1 No. 135. MOTAT's tram line is around 1.67 kilometres long, and the track is dual gauge. The Auckland and Melbourne trams use 4-foot 8.5-inch, or standard gauge, while the Wellington trams use the slightly narrower 4-foot gauge. I only know of one other system that uses the unusual 4-foot gauge, and that's the Glasgow subway in Scotland, of all lines. I thought I'd ride up to the aviation hall aboard Auckland No. 11, the oldest operational electric tram in New Zealand. She was built way back in 1902, and is now restored to her 1912 condition, having been running at MOTAT since 1977. As I had never taken a ride on this tram before, I was surprised to see that her main saloon has a longitudinal seat down one side and a transverse seating on the other. I didn't photograph the interior because there were a lot of passengers.
so much, Ashley, that we're just not understanding this.
Number 11 didn't hang around for too long before returning to Great North Road. There's a large collection of aircraft on display in the aviation hall, with the main subject of this photograph being a short Solent flying boat, with the registration Zulu Kilo Alpha Mike Oscar. This beast was built in 1949. Elsewhere in the hall, you'll find a second product from Short Brothers of Belfast, Northern Ireland. This is November Zulu 4115, an S-25 Sunderland flying boat built in 1945. Although these things weren't built by Saunders Roe, they still remind me of the mighty SR-45 Princess. Meanwhile, steam locomotive Y542 was hauling a passenger train over on the Western Springs Railway. She was built by the Hunslet Engine Company of Leeds in 1923, which makes her 100 years old at the time of uploading.
So you might want to, after boys, quick, we're going to be all done.
It doesn't take long to cover the full line, given how short it is, and I was intending to get to the sheds in time for the unveiling of the two German-built locomotives. Although, by the time they actually got to the unveiling ceremony, the rain was absolutely chucking it down.
Okay, do we want to go see the ceremony for when they show off the new train?
Besides Y542, two more ex-NZR steam locomotives were running, namely L507 and F180. I didn't know what to make of this little green diesel, as I had never seen her before. The three main tank engines had all gathered outside the shed to attend the unveiling ceremony, and I managed to get this shot of all 5 operational locomotives idling in the yard together. The speeches were given inside the workshop, because of the poor weather, but I soon went back outside because I don't really like being surrounded by loads of people in a small space. This little black 040 well tank is known as Bertha, and she was built by Orenstein and Koppel of Berlin in 1914. And the little green diesel is number 5774, built by Motorenfabrik Oberursel in 1912. As far as I know, This unique survivor is the oldest diesel locomotive in New Zealand, but please correct me if I'm wrong. As an aside, the Oberursel name is known to me, as it is an area served by the Frankfurt U-Bahn, and I've had that route in Train Simulator for several years now. For reference, the town is served by line U3 of the Frankfurt U-Bahn, as well as line S5 of the S-Bahn Rhine-Main network. Shortly after the ribbon cutting, Y542 went back to the station to resume the passenger service down to Keith Park.
I've no problems with
I was allowed to climb up on F180's footplate after politely asking the driver, and once there I got another picture of Bertha and the Oberursel locomotive. I think this was the first time I had ever been on the footplate of an F-Class 060 saddle tank while she was actually in steam. The only other Fs whose footplates I remember visiting were 230 and 233. It's good to see this 1960s era excursion star still going strong at 149 years old. According to the builder's plate on the back of the cab, F180 was built by the Yorkshire Engine Company in 1874.
aviation hall.
I went back to Great North Road aboard the W2, although on the return trip, this thing was absolutely packed full of people. Something I spotted over at MOTAT 1 was the lesser-known ex-Melbourne W7 class number 1032, a tram built in 1956, although she is not in working order at the time of uploading, and hasn't run since 2017. I found 135 parked in one of the tram sheds, while her crew were on their lunch break. Meanwhile, 47 was sitting in the next shed over, with ex-Melbourne SW6 class number 893 for company. .321 came along and took 135's place in the shed, as it was now time for the W2's crew to have their lunch break. These pictures of M.O.T.A.T's model railway turned out much better than I was expecting, given the subpar lighting in the room, although I suppose it was partly because I had the camera flash enabled. Then it was time to go back to the Western Springs Railway, because two of my friends, one of whom hadn't yet seen the railway, had now arrived. We found Bertha in charge of L533, a freight wagon that has been modified to carry passengers. Now that the weather had finally improved, I went and had a look at DSA 223. This 70-year-old locomotive was built by the Drury Car Company in 1953 and is sometimes used to haul a passenger train if the steam locomotives are unavailable, as was the case in August 2023. And that was the end of my coverage on MOTAT's rail-themed Live Day. To end the day's rail fanning, I went over to Portage Road, just outside the New Lynn Trench, and filmed 3 of the AM-class electric multiple units, but I was absolutely disgusted at what some abhorrent vandals have done to AM 701.